What happens when a seasoned journalist refuses to play by the rules of royal protocol? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America, expecting friendly questions and sympathetic nods, only to face the most intense interrogation of her post-royal career. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It's a masterclass in journalistic integrity colliding with manufactured victimhood, culminating in an explosive confrontation broadcast live across the nation. The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan Markle stepped onto the GMA set. Dressed in her signature beige ensemble, a calculated choice meant to project sophistication and warmth, she settled into her chair with the poised ease of someone well-practiced in public appearances. Her smile was perfectly measured, her posture relaxed, her jewelry subtle yet unmistakably expensive. Across from her sat George Stephanopoulos, a veteran interviewer whose calm intensity had disarmed presidents and politicians alike. Unlike the fawning hosts Meghan had grown accustomed to since leaving royal duties, Stephanopoulos came prepared, with questions designed to pierce through her media polish. The interview began with the usual pleasantries. Warm greetings, a compliment or two, the kind of banter viewers expect before things turn serious. But even then, something felt off. Stephanopoulos' smile didn't reach his eyes, and Meghan's replies carried a hint of tension, as if she already sensed this wouldn't be the safe platform she'd anticipated. "Thank you for joining us this morning, Meghan," Stephanopoulos began smoothly. "You've been very active lately with your projects and public statements. I think many viewers are curious about the disconnect between your calls for privacy and your continued presence in the media spotlight." The question landed like a dart. Meghan's practiced smile faltered for an instant, barely perceptible to casual viewers, but obvious to anyone familiar with the micro-expressions of someone caught off guard. "Well, George," she replied evenly, "I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what privacy means in this context. It's about having the right to control our own narrative, especially when it comes to protecting our children and our family's well-being." Stephanopoulos leaned forward slightly. "But isn't there a contradiction in seeking privacy while simultaneously engaging in high-profile interviews, documentaries, and public appearances? You've spoken often about very personal family matters. How do you reconcile that?" The atmosphere tightened. Meghan straightened subtly, her tone sharpening. "When lies are told about you, when your family is constantly misrepresented, you have a responsibility to set the record straight. We didn't choose to engage with the media. We were forced to." "Forced is an interesting word choice," Stephanopoulos noted, his voice calm but cutting. "From the outside, it appears that you and Harry have been quite strategic about your media engagements. The timing of your Oprah interview, for instance, coincided with your father-in-law's health issues and your grandmother-in-law's declining condition. Some might say that timing was calculated to maximize impact. The shift was immediate. Meghan's composure cracked slightly. Her jaw tightened. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. "I find it disappointing that you'd call our truth-telling calculated," she shot back, her voice rising. "We waited years to tell our side. We endured racist coverage and relentless attacks. Suggesting we should have stayed silent while our reputations were destroyed is absurd." Stephanopoulos didn't flinch. "Let's talk about some of those claims," he continued, consulting his notes. "You've made several statements that have since been disputed, such as your comment about a secret wedding ceremony, which the Archbishop of Canterbury denied. How do you respond to those who say you've been selective with the truth?" Meghan froze, visibly rattled. "I'm sorry," she said after a beat. "Are you calling me a liar?" The studio fell silent. Even the crew stopped moving, sensing the gravity of the moment. "I'm not calling you anything," Stephanopoulos replied evenly. "I'm asking you to address discrepancies between your statements and established facts. That's journalism, asking hard questions and seeking clarity." The exchange marked a turning point. Meghan's body language stiffened, her tone sharpened. And what began as a controlled interview descended into a raw, unfiltered confrontation, one that would soon dominate headlines and redefine how both journalist and subject were perceived. Just as Meghan opened her mouth to respond, something in Stephanopoulos' expression made it clear. He wasn't finished. The toughest questions were still to come. The air in the studio was electric as Meghan straightened in her chair, her composure beginning to unravel. What had started as mild discomfort was now something far more volatile. Everyone watching knew they were witnessing a moment that would be dissected for years to come. "You know what, George?" Meghan began, her tone sharp and defensive. "I think what's really happening here is that you're pushing the same narrative the British tabloids have been spreading for years. You're taking their word over mine, and frankly, I expected better from someone of your stature." Stephanopoulos didn't flinch. He had questioned world leaders and political heavyweights. A celebrity deflection wasn't going to throw him off. "I'm not taking anyone's word," he replied evenly. "I'm presenting you with documented facts and asking for your response. That's journalism. For example, in your Oprah interview, you claimed that upon joining the royal family, you surrendered your passport and driver's license and weren't allowed to leave the country. Yet, we have photographs of you traveling to New York for your baby shower, to Canada multiple times, and on other international trips. How do you reconcile those statements?" The question hit its mark. Meghan's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely caught off guard. This was no friendly chat. Stephanopoulos had come armed with receipts. "That's completely taken out of context," she stammered, her usual polish faltering. "What I meant was that there were restrictions, protocols. Every trip required approval, coordination with security. There were guidelines that made it impossible to have real freedom of movement." Stephanopoulos glanced at his notes again, clearly prepared for her answer. "But that contradicts what other members of the royal family have said about their experiences," he continued. "Prince William and Catherine have described a level of autonomy that doesn't match what you're suggesting. Are you saying you were treated differently?" The question struck at the heart of Meghan's narrative. Her response came fast and heated. "Of course I was treated differently," she snapped. "Do you really think the first biracial American woman to marry into that family would be treated the same as everyone else? The racism, the double standards, the constant undermining, it was relentless." Stephanopoulos leaned back slightly, his tone turning serious. "Let's talk about those racism allegations specifically. You claimed that there were concerns expressed about your son's skin color, but you've never provided names or context. Don't you think the public deserves more specificity when such serious accusations are made?" The question visibly unsettled her. Meghan shifted in her seat, her voice growing tense. "I protected the people involved by not naming them," she said. "But those conversations happened. They were deeply hurtful to both Harry and me." Stephanopoulos pressed on. "But without specifics, without names, context, or evidence, how can the public evaluate your claims? In journalism, we rely on verification and corroboration. You're asking people to accept very serious allegations on faith alone." That struck a nerve. Meghan's cheeks flushed as her frustration boiled over. "Are you seriously questioning whether I experienced racism?" She shot back. "Have you not seen the double standards in the coverage? The constant criticism of everything I did compared to my sister-in-law?" "I'm not questioning your experience," Stephanopoulos replied calmly. "I'm questioning the details of your public statements. There's a difference between unfair media treatment and accusing members of the royal family of racism. Those are very different claims." "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Meghan exclaimed, her voice rising. "You're minimizing my experiences, twisting my words, and calling me a liar while pretending it's journalism. This isn't journalism. It's harassment, disguised as an interview." That accusation seemed to harden Stephanopoulos' expression. "I'm asking the questions that should have been asked long ago," he said firmly. "If accountability feels uncomfortable, That says more about your previous interviews than it does about my approach. That was the breaking point. Meghan's breathing quickened. Her hands clenched the arms of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Accountability? She repeated, her voice trembling with anger. This isn't accountability. It's a setup. You made up your mind before I even walked in here. You're trying to tear me down piece by piece. The studio fell into a heavy silence. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of what had become one of the most explosive interviews in recent memory. A clash between control and confrontation that neither would soon forget. Production assistants exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to step in or let the confrontation play out. Stephanopoulos, sensing that the situation was approaching a breaking point, decided to press one step further with a question that would prove to be the point of no return. "Meghan," he began, his voice carrying the weight of seasoned authority. "Let me ask you about something our research team uncovered while preparing for this interview. We found financial records showing that you and Harry received substantial payments from Netflix and Spotify before you officially stepped down from royal duties. How do you reconcile your claims about being cut off financially by the royal family with evidence that you were already securing lucrative entertainment deals while still working royals?" The question hit like a bomb. Meghan's face flickered through a range of emotions: shock, panic, fury, and finally a cold rage that seemed to burn through her composure. Her carefully maintained public image cracked completely, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "How dare you sit there and act like you understand what we went through? You have no idea what it's like to be abandoned by an institution, to have your security stripped away, to be left to fend for yourself while the tabloids tear you apart every single day." Stephanopoulos didn't flinch. He consulted his notes with the calm detachment of someone who had weathered countless political storms. "But the timeline doesn't support that narrative," he continued evenly. "According to these documents, initial discussions with streaming platforms began months before your official departure from royal duties. That suggests a level of planning that contradicts your claims of being suddenly cut off with no options." Meghan shot to her feet so suddenly that her chair rolled backward, the sound echoing through the silent studio. Her face was flushed with anger, her hands trembling as she realized her narrative was being dismantled on live television. "This is unbelievable," she said sharply. "You've ambushed me with selectively edited information taken completely out of context, and now you're trying to paint me as some kind of calculating opportunist. This isn't journalism. This is character assassination." "These aren't edited documents, Meghan," Stephanopoulos replied, looking up from his notes. "They're public financial filings and contractual agreements. I'm simply asking you to explain the discrepancies between your statements and the evidence." That seemed to push her beyond control. She began pacing behind her chair like a caged animal, her movements erratic. "You want the truth?" she shouted. "The truth is that we had to protect ourselves because nobody else would. We had to secure our future because the institution made it clear we were expendable. Yes, we explored our options. Wouldn't you, if your family was being destroyed by lies and racism?" Stephanopoulos seized on the moment. "So you acknowledge that you were pursuing commercial opportunities while still claiming to serve royal duties?" he asked pointedly. "And you did so while publicly stating your desire to continue serving the Queen and the Commonwealth?" The question went straight to the heart of what critics had long suspected, that Meghan's departure from royal life had been far more calculated than she admitted. "You're twisting my words," she cried, her composure gone. "You're turning everything I say into something sinister. This is exactly why we had to leave, because people like you were determined to destroy us no matter what we did." The studio was silent except for her frantic voice and the low hum of cameras capturing every moment. Production assistants stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the confrontation reach its natural end. Recognizing that she'd reached her breaking point, Stephanopoulos delivered the final blow. "Meghan, you've built your post-royal brand on being a victim of racism and betrayal. But the evidence suggests careful planning, strategy, and narrative control that contradict nearly everything you've said publicly. How do you expect the public to trust you when the facts tell such a different story?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Meghan stopped pacing, her expression a mix of rage and humiliation. For a moment, it looked as though she might lash out again, but instead, something inside her seemed to give way. "I'm done," she said flatly. "I'm absolutely done with this charade." She reached for her purse, scattering items across the floor as she struggled to unclip her microphone, her hands shaking. "This entire interview has been a setup from the beginning," she declared, her voice rising. "You had no intention of having an honest conversation. You just wanted to humiliate me on live television." Stephanopoulos remained seated, his tone calm. "I wanted honest answers to legitimate questions. If you find that humiliating, that's not a reflection of my intentions. It's a reflection of the contradictions in your own statements." That was the final spark. Meghan straightened, glaring at him with pure fury. "You know what, George? You can take your legitimate questions and your documented evidence and shove them where the sun doesn't shine. I don't have to sit here and listen to this garbage from someone who's clearly been bought and paid for by the same people who've tried to destroy me for years." The accusation made Stephanopoulos raise his eyebrows slightly, though he remained composed. "That's a very serious accusation, Meghan. Do you have any evidence to support it? Or is this another example of making statements you can't substantiate?" That broke her. Letting out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scream, she gathered her things and stormed toward the exit. "Find yourself another victim for your hit job," she shouted. "I'm done being your entertainment." At the door, she turned back one last time, her voice echoing across the silent studio. "And for the record, everything I said about that family and that institution is true. The fact that you'd rather believe palace bureaucrats and racist tabloids over a woman who lived through it says everything about who you are." With that, Meghan pushed through the doors and disappeared from view, leaving behind a stunned silence. The cameras continued rolling as Stephanopoulos sat alone, his expression a mix of professionalism and disbelief. After a long pause, he turned to the camera and said evenly, "Well, that certainly wasn't the conversation we were expecting to have this morning. We'll be right back after these messages." As the show cut to commercial, the studio erupted into hushed chatter. Everyone knew they had just witnessed television history, a moment when a carefully constructed public narrative collapsed under the weight of real journalism.